All right, welcome back to another edition of Zero Blog 30. Today we're going to be talking about episode 3 of the new shows, Masters of the Air. We already did episodes 1 and 2. If you want to go back and watch that, that would be great. It's right there on the Zero Blog 30 page on Rumble or on YouTube. I think a couple other places too, but those are where we want you to find them. But today we're going to be talking about episode 3. Now, there's a couple of us that weren't, cons mainly, that said that episodes 1 and 2 were not good. And now we're in episode 3. We got Rudy here, Chief, me, White Sox Dave, and Nikki Smokes. First up, I want to ask Rudy, what was your impressions of episode 1 and 2 before we get going?
I thought they were great. I've recently become like obsessed with World War II, so this was good timing. It's like the last year and a half. I'm like,
welcome to your 30s, brother.
Yeah, you're at that stage of your life.
I've been told that joke like many times. We're like, oh, that makes sense. You turn 30, and I just got really into it, and I can't get enough of it. And anytime something new comes out, you kind of always go into it with like a measured sense of like, is this going to be like historically accurate? Like, what are they going to cover? Is it going to be like, be cool, be badass, or is it going to be incredible? This I thought is very, very good. And then I found out that it's sort of like a stepsister, or it's meant to be like in the same camp as Band of Brothers. It's like, I read the Wikipedia, so that's no surprise that it's very good in that regard. I loved it. I thought it was really good. It's really cool to see more of the aerial assault, because typically shows and everything else focuses on the ground assault. And I'm like a nerd for like the troop movements. Like, that's what I get fucked up on. So I'm excited. Like, I probably won't shut the fuck up about this.
You love a good map.
Love a good map.
Arrows.
This morning,
Love maps.
This morning I was reading my book. I have the Smithsonian book that's the World War II map by maps.
Oh,
and I was reading up.
Need to link me to that.
It's fire. It's fire. It's not as good as like certain other videos. Like, there's a lot of YouTube channels that do really good like troop movements and everything.
With the flags.
And since we're getting into episode 3, there's this YouTube channel that had this entire raid on their channel, so it was really cool. I'm glad that they did this particular mission on it, so I can't wait. I'm gonna try to do my best. Like, this is a hobby of mine, chaps. If I say anything that's out of line, I want to be respectful to the veterans.
I think cons, being a West Point guy, would probably, I don't know a whole ton about World War II history, but I'm sure cons, and Dave looks into it a lot too, right? Like,
all of us do, yeah.
Rudy, I'm curious, when you look at all these maps, do they show like the troop movement and use all the icons?
Yes.
Or do you understand all of them, or have you taught yourself like what a box with a cross means, or a box with an X and things of that nature?
No, so that I don't know. Like, the book I have does show that. I don't know what those means, like the particular symbols and all that stuff. And then the YouTube videos I watch, they kind of dumb it down. They don't show that. They kind of just show like an airplane here, and they name them, but I don't know that stuff yet. So that's sort of the next thing I would like to get into.
I'm sure you could Google like a key, but there's very standardized way that we use maps and icons to denote certain types of units, whether it's like an artillery unit and an infantry unit. And those are all standardized. So it just kind of maybe helps you to understand what you're looking at from the perspective of what type of mission it was.
Colors and things like that.
That's what that's going to fuck me up, because I like that. Because like, I rewatch Band of Brothers like 4 times. I rewatch the documentaries all the time, because every time there's like something new, little piece of information that I want to learn about. So like, I rewatched Band of Brothers like a month ago for like the 6th time. And then this time I was like focusing on like the ranks. I was like, okay, like major, like a battalion leader. I'm like, where do these people fall? So I started looking into that, and then there's like the
Call of Duty is accurate for that.
Really?
Yeah.
And so like,
close.
I'm really into like, like a battalion leader, platoon leader. It's like there's so many layers to all of it. So yeah, I'm fucked up on it, dude. It's like my favorite thing to do in my spare time.
All right, next up, cons. You had probably the strongest opinion anti after we were going down at the end of the show on the first episode. What did you think about episode 3, initial impressions?
I wanted so bad for it to turn the corner and turn into a good show, and it just did not. Okay?
No.
The acting continues to be so horrible, and over dramatized that it's distracting. I cannot take these men seriously because even back then, people didn't talk like that. The colonel who gets up and is giving the mission brief at the beginning, he's talking, and I'm thinking to myself, are you trying to perform Macbeth up here? What are you doing, my dude? It was so horrible, and he was speaking in cliches. It was just not good. It continues to be not good. I'm sorry. And I know everybody, again, wants it to be good. And because it's in the same family as Pacific and Band of Brothers, like, well, it's going to be good. It's okay to admit that it's not good.
Can I ask
And
you?
I'm not afraid to say that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How dare you?
Are you one of the people who, like, will watch Remember the Titans and be like, this movie sucks because the blocking wasn't like authentic to how football blocking is?
No.
Okay.
No. I'm not talking about the historical accuracy here or the accuracy in terms of the operations within a flying fortress. That all seems to me, from what I understand, fairly accurate. I'm merely talking about the ability of these men to act. And it's so poor that it's distracting. No one talks the way that these people are talking. There was one where there was one line. He says, "We're sending them up to hell alone." It's
I thought that
holy
was a
shit,
great
dude.
line,
No
though.
one talks like that. Yeah, it's a great line.
But you're a normie.
But we also
but it's a
love We Were
show.
Soldiers, and that kind of happens.
Do we?
What kind of? Who are you to tell me what morning it is? I will be the last person
Great
to
movie.
step off this bird, and I will be the last person.
Those are accurate words,
to
though.
get
Those
off.
are accurate words.
But the way that
if you read his journal, those are accurate words. This is some dude who wrote this script out of thin air. We're talking
So-
about two different things.
Well,
Don't
if you
dare
say that,
disparage Colonel
if you
Moore.
say that it's not realistic, he used those words that are just as boisterous and absolutely.
But he
when-
actually used them. This person wrote a script that these people didn't say these words. He's making it dramatic for the sake of being dramatic.
Yeah, it's a drama show. It's
Oh
a
my
drama.
God, but it's so dramatic that it's like watching a daytime soap opera. It's bad.
Dave?
It's so bad.
Dave, your thoughts?
I gave the first 2 episodes. I'm like, all right. We were talking. I don't know if this was on camera or off camera, but Nikki Smoke's like, I hate the first episode of Band of Brothers. I think that episode's great, but if I were watching it one by one, I'd be like, whatever, because you don't know what's following that. Trying to operate in the same way, I agree with Cons. I gave the first 2 episodes a chance. The third episode was just exactly more of the same, and the acting is very fucking bad.
Ryan?
I thought the third episode was a step up in class. I thought I thoroughly enjoyed it. I did get more locked into the characters. Like I said in episode 1 and 2 that I was with you on how do you pronounce his name? Barry Cohen?
Yeah.
The Irish guy who had like a weird hybrid New York accent that I also found distracting. I remember being like, I'm not gonna fucking care if this guy dies.
Blink.
I fucking cared. I cared when his plane went down. I cared about that. So they even though I was like anticipating, be like, the acting, especially from his end, who I normally love that actor, fell flat for me. I ended up caring about him. I thought that the third episode was a lot better than the first 2.
The action scenes were great.
They were
They're-
incredible.
They're incredible, but you saw a lot of that in the first 2 episodes already.
Not
That's
to
the other thing.
not to the
Listen,
same
guys,
level.
we need to talk about something. This is important. There's not much variety to the missions that they're
Right,
doing.
right.
They go up, they fly in a straight line.
Well, that's their
maybe
job.
They get attacked. I'm not taking anything away from what these men
Seems
did.
like-
Yes.
It was incredibly brave. I'm talking about from an entertainment standpoint.
Yes.
Every mission, more or less, is the same
Right.
mission. You go up, you fly straight in formation, you might get flak, you might get some fighters, you drop your bombs, maybe one of your planes gets shot up. It's going to be the same thing over and over. It's not like a fighter pilot who could go every which way direction. These planes were built to just go straight.
Well, I mean,
so every mission is the same. It's boring.
you
Go
can
ahead.
you can kind of say that about any other war movie
can't.
or TV show.
No,
look,
no,
look,
I'm
they're
not-
they're on.
Cons,
Can I go? Can I?
Let
fucking-
Nick
mission
talk,
was Jesus
Cons.
Christ.
Jesus Christ. Nick,
Like,
go ahead.
In every fucking war movie, every war show, they're on the ground. They're fighting. Now it's going to be a little different here and there. They might go to this place. They might go to that place. They might have different objectives. Yes, they're in the air every time, but no, it's not the same fucking fight in the air that they're having every single time. That's not the case.
Yes,
I don't
it
thi-
is.
I don't
They
think
go
it
up,
is.
they fly straight.
It's not.
And they drop their bombs.
They're not flying straight. They went this way, they went that way, they ended up in fucking Africa.
No, I see. I don't think, but there are so many variables, and there's so many different things to coordinate. Like, oh, they're flying straight, but they had 3 different missions kind of going on at the same time, and one of the groups got left out on their own because they didn't take off at the right time. So there are other variables and things. It feels like when I'm watching them talk about these missions, it's like this whole thing is like a 2-7 draw. You're trying for an inside straight with all these different moving parts on every single mission. That's how it's like we got to send these first 2 first, so then it's almost like they're doing the blocking and tackling, or it's like a decoy, and then you guys are going to go, and then you're going to go all the way to Africa. And I hope it works out because all the communications are kind of...
They also introduced a side plot in that 3rd episode with that one kid that parachuted out of the plane, and he has the option to turn himself in or if he can
wait
escape.
to see
So
that.
that's like a whole other thing.
I'm
Great
interested
point.
to see how that plays out. Him
That
trying to get
seems-
back to safety, and they gave him the option: you can surrender to the Germans, be a POW, or try to just get back to England. I think that will be interesting because that will present different challenges along the way. Whereas I think, by and large, yes, each mission they'll have some variables here and there. By and large, every mission more or less the same.
You could kind of say that I agree with Nick that in a lot of infantry movies, if you don't know a whole lot that's going on, every single one they're trying to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver. Right. That's what the infantry does. This is what the air does. And I think, hold on, Cons, one of my favorite aspects of the show is the moral part of it. Like when he's standing there and he has to decide, do I jump? Or do I get this guy out of the turret? Do I jump?
Yeah.
Like there was a couple spots. The one who was going to help his buddy died when he was trying to land the plane. He was dead. The one who made what most would say is the moral wrong decision and leaving somebody behind, which is against our principles as Americans, he was killed. So you have somebody that didn't do what he was supposed to do, lived. Somebody who did do what he was supposed to do, died. Yep. I think that dichotomy is going to come up later, and I have a prediction. The guy the new dude that is the gunner, that was like, I want to go and lay and spray, turn these cows into beef, all that stuff. I think he's going to be a huge pussy. Huge.
That's usually how it goes.
Yeah.
Rudy, what did you think did you think that the first 3 episodes was much of the same, or did you see variance?
There wasn't a ton of variance, but you're talking to like this like scratches my autism, so I don't really need variance. I just need operations. I want to see. I did like that they have limited the amount of like personal stories. Like Band of Brothers did a very good job of that. Pacific went a little bit more into it.
I agree,
but they did a good job of it. Different theater of war. I think that they've done a good job of like limiting it. Yes, the character development isn't very good. Austin Butler, I'm kind of with Chaps on this. Cons on this. I care less about it because it's shot super well. There's definitely some dialogue in it that's just sort of like, okay, like we're doing rah, 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 like, sort of Top Gun style shit. That's fine. I just think Austin Butler is just too hot.
That's what I said. That was the first thing I said.
He might just be
He's
too hot.
distractingly so.
Yes.
And he's
And
kind
also,
of in this like
not to
Lincoln
nitpick.
Osiris shit. He's stuck as Elvis.
I
Yeah.
agree with that. When the scene that they're going and they find out that they're going to Africa and he's kind of leaned back a little bit, I was like, he's leaning back like Elvis. There is certain parts about, and I agree that the acting, nobody in this show would get an Oscar for sure. I'm saying with shows like this, military shows, I've never seen, there's not many that aren't cheesy as shit.
Right.
Like that's just the nature of the beast. Whenever people who haven't done it are doing it, it's going to be over the top, all of those things. I get that. I don't mind. I don't think that he's going to win an Emmy or anything like that, but I do love the action scenes.
Yeah,
I think it puts in perspective because there's not a whole lot of shows that show that. You have like the Top Guns and you have the fighter pilot movies and shows. You have the infantry based, you have the tank based like in Fury.
Yep.
You don't get a lot of somebody that is a gunner in a bubble locked in there and trying to figure out how the hell they're going to do this. You don't have where your passenger, the co-pilot, is getting shot right through and you have to move his body whenever you're trying to get out. What do we do with his body? All those decisions that you have to make in the moment. I thought more so than entertaining, for me, it was incredibly thought-provoking because I had never thought about it through the lens of somebody who is in the
and
air.
I never thought about the navigators being on the plane back then. I always thought the pilot was in control, or if he had a map, they literally had a guy designated back there. He's not armed. He's not shooting. His whole job is to, yes, our plane's getting shot at. Now I have to find my map and get us to.
Crosby was pulling trick.
Yeah.
Crosby was pulling trick.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And
But, like, that's-
Cons, tell me how inaccurate that shit is. That a major goes back and kicks the corporal or sergeant off the machine gun and is like, I'm going to take it. There is no major, I think, ever that would do that because they're not proficient at the machine gun.
Not to mention, most combat maneuver units aren't going to have a major mixed in with the unit on the ground, so it's just not going to present itself. But further to that point, to what Chaps was saying, you just aren't going to throw off an NCO from his job and say, "Oh, I'll do it better."
Who's
that just
way
really
more
wouldn't
proficient.
happen unless like there was no other option, and maybe that NCO got killed. Then he's going to jump up on the weapon. But
that didn't happen here. Like I think honestly, you could tell somebody to go fuck himself. Like that level of proficiency that it takes to be a machine gunner is not something that you could do once or twice. And officers, Cons, how many times do you shoot a machine gun?
Not a lot.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like they don't do it, and that's not to say that they're weak
I did it
or
in training.
anything. Yeah,
and that was more or less it. I never fired a
4
machine gun in
years.
combat.
4 years after you had done it the last time, could you hop on a machine gun, rack it forward, find the headspace and timing, do all that stuff? I would venture
not the head spacing time.
Yeah,
I'd be lost on that.
Yeah, and that's the things that you have to do. You have to knowingly put a barrel on. The barrel's heavy as shit. You have to put your glove on. The way that you have to take it off is completely different. Everything is hot as fuck, like to the point where when they're going at all of those different fighter pilots, the level that it takes, the strength to hold on and be able to do that, not a whole lot of people. And those are muscles that you don't use a whole lot. Then the weapon, you saw the guy burned his hand. That was one of the worst experiences I had, was watching somebody, because they had to, the place that they were in, we got surrounded in a canal, people were fucking coming in, and you couldn't see, you were going to get mowed the fuck down if you didn't have Ma Deuces and 240s and all kinds of shit that were lined up, 249s I mean. And then you have to change a barrel in the middle of it, because if you don't do it, it's going to turn red hot and it could blow up. So you have to go in, know what you're going to do, and then there's always a malfunction. If you don't know how to get the gun up, you will die.
Damn.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I did the same thing too when that I think it was the first episode when he touched the barrel or he was trying to fix it. But I think I read later it wasn't the heat.
It was
It
cold.
was so cold he got instant frostbite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn.
Because of the altitude.
Yeah. Because it's negative 50 degrees up there.
Well,
But
maybe
same
that cools it.
principle.
I mean, maybe that cools it down. You know, like maybe, I don't know, but negative 50, maybe it keeps it where it is manageable. Nevertheless, you can't touch it. If you don't, that goes even more so. There's no chance an officer who only went to combat thinking that he was going to fly as a pilot, there is no chance he ran a machine gun at negative 50. None.
Yeah, that was some movie magic. I'm glad you guys cleared that up because I was curious about that too. Because Callum Turner's character Bucky, first of all, that guy dates Dua Lipa. Props.
Wow.
But
Never look at him.
also, of all the British dudes that do accents, like Barry Keoghan, great actor. He did okay with the New York thing.
Rudy, I said he sounds just like Mike Grinnell if you listen to him in this show.
Kind
A little bit, right?
Yeah, he does. Yeah. But the Callum Turner dude's British, and his accent's pretty solid. But I'm glad you guys cleared that up because he operates in it like he's just like going around like he's a major. the age thing didn't really quite line up, but they're hot. Like Band of Brothers, like you got Mark Wahlberg's brother in there who looks like a fucking plumber.
40.
Yeah, and so like that part I
Wait.
was like, okay.
The new kid on the block?
Donnie Wahlberg's in that.
Yeah.
What? I didn't even
In Band of
recognize
Brothers.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
He's one of the
Oh,
main
don't
guys.
look at me
Yeah.
like I have a dick growing out of my head, Dave.
Sergeant Lipton.
Yeah.
Sergeant Lipton.
Lipton.
Yeah.
Carl Lipton.
But yeah, I was curious about that because he was running around like, oh, I want to go on this, I want to go on that. I was like, this doesn't really seem like how it fucking goes. But it's a show. I can overlook that a little bit. But
The
yeah,
one other thing I was curious about in terms of training to be a gunner on one of these planes, how do you replicate in training what a fighter can look like in the air in terms of the speed?
That's a great
So
question.
if you think about it, when anytime I fired an M2, it's on the ground. Maybe it's attached to a vehicle of some sort, and
Madu's
I'm
50
shooting
caliber machine gun.
Okay.
and I'm shooting at stationary targets more or less. Maybe they're moving a little bit. You're talking about fighter jets that are moving hundreds of miles an hour, and you got to lead them. And I guess maybe with
You're
tracers,
spraying and
you could
praying.
get an idea.
I think you're
Yeah.
spraying
Yeah,
and
that's what I
praying.
think.
Yeah.
Spraying and praying.
Is it any more than just trying to like shoot in the general area and hope you hit them?
I feel like it might be like a quarterback trying to hit a slant route. You know, like you got to
Times 1,000.
Yeah,
It's
where-
exactly
Yeah, but you
like
can
that.
practice
Yeah.
that. Is my
Yeah.
point.
I think
How
you're.
do you
I think
replicate
you're
that in
absolutely
practice?
right. Like there's
Yeah.
certain elements that you could train, and I think that Buck. I forget which one is Buck. Is that the? Is,
So
is Aus-
Buck
which
is
one Austin?
Elvis. Bucky is the other
Okay,
guy.
so Bucky, whenever he's out, he's like, I can't tell anybody what's going on. Like I don't want to tell. I think that's the most accurate shit. One of the most accurate things because you cannot describe it.
yeah, when he's
like-
like, why didn't you tell me
Yeah.
what it was like?
Yeah,
He's
you
like,
can't describe it. And if you do describe it, it's going to be one, you can't go up completely scared. You almost have to begin combat operations ignorant.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if you knew what was coming, if you knew what it actually sounds like when rounds are like bullets are coming over your head in the snap. And I think it's awesome in training when you experience why you do certain training. Like I always wondered as a Marine, no other branches go down and pull their targets up and then bring them back down. Like you're behind a berm. You pull the target up, you bring it back down. I didn't realize the reason why that happens until I was in war, because you know what it sounds like when it's coming at you. The sound of a bullet does not sound like the explosion of gunpowder and the projectile coming out. It sounds like a snap that's coming over your head, a loud snap. So when you if you can hear the gunfire, you're behind it. If you hear the snap, you're in front of it. So you have to march to the sounds of the
Damn.
guns.
I do have one other question similar to that. When they're in their fortress, and they do that, obviously strength in numbers. I went and like looked that up. That was interesting and something that the lead guy, who's Curtis, it's not the same guy as Barry Kogan. They're both named Curtis. They don't show him in the show, but the lead guy was the one that came up with the fortress idea. But when they're in the fortress and the Luftwaffe are coming at them, they usually try to do 12 high where they're in the sun, right? And they come down. Now, when they're in a firefight, I was like, how the fuck are they not hitting each other?
I thought that too.
Yeah, I thought that.
When they were
Yeah.
ripping the 50 cal and just
Yeah.
going at, I was like, that's collateral damage. Somebody's getting,
And there was one scene where they kind of cut it where it looked like
it hit the wing.
it, like they
Yeah.
hit each other, and I was like, okay, are they going to talk about that? They didn't. It's not a huge thing, but it's just something that popped in my head. I don't know if anyone. We're not fortress experts.
No,
I
did think about certain elements of that, like being completely on your own. There is no medics, there is no anything like that. And seeing when you're flying some of the crazy shit that those pilots had to have seen, like the scene where he looks out the window and he sees
The guy on
the
his
body hit the wing.
Yeah.
Like, dude, how do you see your co-pilot completely shot up next to you and remain totally, completely calm? And I think folks watching that think that that's not going to happen where your voice gets elevated, but it is crazy how much you can slow your brain down whenever you're there. And I think that there was a lot of it that was a little unrealistic, but some a lot of people that are in those positions are able to calm down and think slower.
So I was wondering about that too, because in Band of Brothers, when they're in the second episode where they're doing the drop and there's flak everywhere and planes are going down, the guy just like, we're not anywhere near our drop zone. Fuck it, green button. Like send those guys out the door, because he saw his co-pilot get shot and he freaked out. So I was wondering, it's like, are they trying to make these guys like deify them a little bit more, or they're just like these like they're just stone cold, like they can just get through it, or like which one was more accurate? Because Band of Brothers, that seemed to me like a normal human reaction, being like, the panic's taking over. Either we get these guys out now in the wrong zone, I'm just gonna hit it so at least they have a chance, or do we keep going through this shit to get to our objective? And it's like you're kind of weighing that up in real time, and you just make a decision.
Yeah, I think that's the struggle of what Khan's job would be if he was in the air. Like when you're in that command, I feel like it's a much more difficult decision, like when you're there. And I also feel like it's a little bit different when your job is to keep the entire plane in the air too.
Yeah.
Like focusing on all those different things without the benefit of good autopilot, without the benefit of GPS, without the benefit of having a radar that shows you exactly how many feet away from the other plane is. It's crazy. And we talked about the last episode, if you are 1 degree off on your flight, you end up 400 miles out of the way.
That
How do you
Chief,
do
I
that?
think
that
the answer,
perspective. Yeah, go ahead.
well, the answer to your question is both, right? And anybody who says like it's always like this or it's always like that is either lying or never been in combat, because there's no human alive who can tell you, who can predict how they are going to act when they're actually put in that situation. They can tell you how they think they might act. It's kind of like, Mark Wahlberg saying on 9/11, if he was on the plane, it would have went differently.
I hate that.
Sure, got it, cool. You could say like, oh, well, if that happened to my co-pilot, I would stay focused on the mission. You might freak out completely and everything goes to shit. So I don't think there's a way to answer that other than to say every individual will react differently when faced with those types of situations.
Especially when you're dealing with that close. Like I thought about that too. There was, when I was, one of the master sergeants that I was with got shot through the shoulder, and then he got shot in the leg. And when we put him inside the Humvee, the amount of blood that was like coming out, you were like, this smell is horrific too. Like once you smell death in that way, like a fresh death, it's not something that you soon forget. And I'll give you an example. When I worked on Quantico, I was a company gunny, worked in an office, and I got called to go out and to check. There was a suicide that happened. One of the Marines laid down on a railroad track and got ran over.
Oh my God.
That was the report, that there was a Marine that they found, like his wallet was neatly on there. He had a fresh haircut and shit like that. But as soon as I opened the door and walked towards the train tracks, I told the guy that was with me, somebody's dead. Like, because you can just smell it. It's in the air. So having to concentrate all of that, because that dude got destroyed. If that happened, the smell of blood and death is instantaneous.
Holy shit.
And that's not something I'm sure you forget.
No. And so you have what they're going through. That's the reason why I feel like it's good. Acting aside, like there is some obvious problems with the acting, but the moral standpoint, the decisions that you have to make in the moment, it brought back a lot of memories. And I never did anything remotely close to any of that. I just thought about how terrified I would be. And I'm sure all of them were terrified, but having to accomplish the mission still, mind-blowing that they did a lot of it.
I think the most terrifying thing is every time you land from one of those missions and they see how beat up those planes are, they just take a freaking shellacking every single mission. And yet every other time they keep going back up in those planes that, it didn't seem like they were built all too well.
And they had constant reinforcements. Like being a reinforcement and coming in and seeing how fucked up the planes are. Can you imagine? Like, you land there your first day. I also thought it was funny that they referred to an entire continent, the biggest continent. Like, we're going to Africa instead of Algeria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, we're in Africa.
Just get
boys.
somewhere over there.
Yeah, just
keep
aim
going
it
south.
towards Africa.
Yeah.
As long as we're in Africa. But I mean, you go in, there's replacements, and there was replacements obviously we didn't start the beginning of the war, but you go in, and once you hear stories or you see Humvees that have like holes in them, or you see them in like the motor pool trying to get repaired, you're like, oh my fucking God, man. Like, what are we doing?
Why did I pick this job?
Yeah.
And it would be way more seeing a plane land without a wing.
Well, that was interesting for me to see, because if there's one overarching theme of World War II that I've learned from like just consuming as much as I can, is that the American engine, the Allied engine, once America got involved, the biggest factor was the manufacturing and infrastructure.
Yeah, the industrial. Yeah.
So when you really look at how the Americans won World War II, the greatest driving force was the means of production. And they basically overwhelmed. That's like one of my favorite quotes, is that Americans didn't solve their problems. They overwhelmed them.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of really interesting examples. Like when they had the North Africa campaign, that was where the Americans first experienced combat. And they landed in Africa. I can't remember that we're just going to do continent.
Yeah, let's do continent.
Just Africa.
Stick with
They
it.
were just in Africa. And they brought 3 tons of lingerie to barter with the locals with. And the British...
That's a lot of lingerie.
Yep.
The British, who had been at war for a couple of years at the time, were just dumbfounded by the amount of things, the amount of guns, the amount of Humvees, the amount of medical supplies, the amount of 3 tons of lingerie. So the Americans were very good, one, at bringing in an immense amount of equipment, 2, having really strong infrastructure and plans in place to then fix things. This happens with, that's pretty much what just grinded the Germans down. And then in this bombing campaign, they're trying to grind down their means of production. So it's interesting to see that. Like, I'm glad that they sort of took a little bit of time on the guys that are like, okay, they're not in the fight, but they are vital to this. Because when you look at like the German tanks towards the end of the war, they were just pushing them out as much as they could, and they would go out there, and if it was done, it was done. The Americans were very good about, if a tank goes down, they had a whole team of people that would come and repair that tank, and that tank would be fighting maybe 2 days later.
Yep.
That was something that the Germans couldn't really get in terms of their fight, and they didn't really have the ability to towards the end. But so I'm glad that they highlighted that, because that's a very, very important part of the world.
And that was like the whole objective of that 3rd episode, was to take out that manufacturing plant.
Yeah.
The ball bearings and shit like that.
Right. Yep.
I have a lot to say about that mission too, if we want to get into that.
Before you do that, Cons and I have talked about it a lot on this show. So I think that is the biggest. We don't win because we have F-35s. We don't win because we have the 2nd largest nuclear arsenal. We don't win because we have the best infantry, the best Navy. Of course, all of that helps. We win, and we are scary as a force because of logistics. That's the big difference between us. So when people had thought that Russia was a near peer, there is no fucking way, because they couldn't resupply their lines. That would never happen to us. We would always be able to do it because our logistics is the best in the world by miles.
I do have actually a question regarding that for you. So in your time, when you were fighting, how prevalent was that sort of like pipeline of like, you go out, something gets busted, someone comes in? And in World War II, they touted up a lot, and they're not going to get into like the nitty gritty, but like, would you say that was something that was just like, this is seamless, or was it something that was like, sometimes it works great, sometimes it doesn't? Like, what was your experience?
That's outside of my scope. Like, that's not something that I would have been responsible for. Like, my job was just to train my dog to know what I was going to do, remain proficient on weapons, and then I get in the truck and they tell me where the fuck we're going. Yeah. Like, I would go to the mission briefs, obviously, to find out what was going to go on, but everything that happened after that, like if a truck got blown up by an IED or something like that, I had no idea what happened next. I knew we had to change our shit, and then once we changed it, they fixed it, but I didn't ever like go.
That is another interesting aspect of war, and my other question is, that, you know.
Well, Rudy, hold on. Let
Cons,
me
do you
answer
know
that
that?
first question
Yeah,
for
go
you.
ahead,
Yeah.
Cons.
Yeah.
Really, Rudy, what it comes down to is where are you located? Okay.
Yeah.
Big
So
part.
if if we'll take Iraq as the example, because Chaps and I were both in Iraq, we had some very large bases. So when I landed in Iraq and I got there, I was at LSA Anaconda, Logistics Supply Area Anaconda, massive, massive. We took over the Balad Airport and completely changed it into an American base. So everything you could think you would need was there. We had massive, massive motor pools. So any sort of equipment that got banged up, you could go same day and probably change something out, get something fixed. Now, as you get more removed from those large bases to where my last 6 months, I was on a very remote outpost. We were a 2.5 hour drive, about a 45, or I guess less than that, helicopter, but helicopters weren't as prevalent. So usually like a 2.5 hour drive away from the next largest base. So if something got jacked up, first option, fix it yourself, because you might get something, but it might take a few days. So it all just comes down to, we can get everything fixed. It's just a matter of time and location.
Yeah. Yeah.
But overall, I would say no. Like,
yeah.
it is. I think we talked about. It's amazing what they were able to accomplish in the 1940s. Those must have to be the most simple machines. That's the only way it works, right? Like I don't think you could have that now. Like these planes that could take that level of damage, the amount of electronics that are in our plane now.
Oh, it'd be done.
Yeah, I don't think it could do it. I think when they have like to get the turret open, they have a hand crank to move the.
Yeah, nothing digital anywhere.
Yeah, like it's all very manual. When they
Yeah.
move the wing flap up, it was manual. Like they do all that stuff, which is by the design in because they didn't have the ability. But I think that they were probably better at that point than us.
Well, and I think that I can't remember what episode it was in, but they had a thing where it's like, we have an electrical failure. And it's like, if we had an electrical failure on an
That's it.
F-5,
Jump.
good night.
Done.
Jump.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Now it's just like, we'll try to figure it out. You know.
Yeah.
So
And the
plane still
navigators,
runs.
man, I don't think they get enough credit.
I'm obsessed with that storyline too.
I can't get across Chicago without a GPS.
Yeah.
Like looking down and figuring out where you are in the sky with cloud cover, with shit coming down on you. I mean,
Looks like Africa down
because
there.
it's not like
Yeah.
if you were just flying as a crow flies, that's one thing. To get to Florida, they could tell you what altitude, what longitude you're going to be going on. It's different when you have artillery exploding around you. You have to adjust because there's fighter pilots that are coming at you. That, to me, I don't know how they do that because you get completely off course. They're banking. They're doing all that shit. How do they get them back on course? How?
I don't know. It feels like
Well-
once you're off, you're off.
No,
Right.
but you
Yeah.
always-
Tacticians.
you have a compass, and it has the magnet to tell you where north is, and you adjust off of that. So yes, those adjustments happen, and it could be small or it could be drastic, but ultimately you always know where north is, and then you can make your calculations, which speaks to how talented those navigators were, that no matter what was going on in the battle, they would always get them back on course.
Right, but by doing land nav and things like that, shooting an azimuth, even if, like we talked about, 1 degree, like it's very difficult to tell when you're in a plane if you're 1 degree off on your compass. Like that would, even using the best compass, a huge one that looks like a sundial from fucking Mayan times, it would be difficult to tell what it was.
So
Yeah.
I will tell you, when you're using a compass and you're shooting an azimuth and following a degree on the ground, your cheat code is you can terrain associate. And what do I mean by that? You can look at your map and you can know where a mountain is. You can know where a stream is. And you can kind of gauge, am I going in the right direction? Up in the air.
And it has
at
that little
altitude,
X that says you are here, like in the mall.
right. But up in the air, everything kind of looks similar, especially once you get over land. And I don't think that everything was as drastic in terms of the terrain. So they really just 1,000% relied on these azimuths that they were shooting, which makes it even all the more impressive.
I want to talk to somebody that does that. I'm going to look for somebody, hopefully one is still alive, that was a navigator in a B2.
If you want to see an interesting thing, like the navigation part, where for how well they did, there was a lot of, like the Battle of Midway in particular, they had a terrible time navigating.
They got lost, and that helped them in the end.
Yeah, and in the Pacific, it's very fucking difficult because
Islands.
it's like,
just
and
ocean.
then like in the
yeah.
Battle of Midway, like Midway is a tiny speck of land, so there's no landmarks. So that one is very interesting. They did get lost as fuck and got remarkably lucky, but the navigation part is crazy. And then
Think about this, though. They were doing it every day, right? If you do something every day, you get really good at it. Where I think we as a society have kind of fallen off is we've become so heavily reliant on GPS that the idea of just like using cardinal directions and figuring out where you are is something of a time gone by. Like, dude, my wife, thank God she probably won't listen to this. She can't get from like here to there without putting a GPS, and I'm talking like 2-3 miles.
Yep.
And it's not because anybody's stupid. It's just because your brain gets so reliant on that technology that you forget the basics. So if you're just doing the basics every day, it becomes a little bit more second nature.
I have a bad habit where I used to do this thing because I love having a good sense of direction, and I used to try to test myself. There would be times where I would get shit-faced, and then like this little thing in my head would be like, and I did it in Myrtle Beach where I was shit-faced and I decided to walk, and I was like, I'm gonna figure it out, and I ended up having to walk 7 miles. I vastly underestimated the distance. And then I also did it in Chicago, actually. Humble brag, after we won the national championship, I was shit-faced, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna figure out, I want to be alone just for a minute because it was like this crazy experience. And so I've done it a couple times where I'm like, let's get this sense of direction dialed, let's be somebody. And I would just get shit-faced and try to wander home, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody. It's a terrible idea.
So if you walk outside, you
not real
north,
safe.
south.
Do you know what direction you're facing right now?
I am facing east right now.
You are.
Let's see, I couldn't even check
I'm
that.
facing south.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're facing south.
Like, I don't understand how people know that, and I never will.
I think you're
It'll
kinda
never
just-
make sense.
I think you're kind of
it's-
just born with
I
it.
think
Yeah.
it's easy in Chicago, though. I think it's easier in Chicago than most cities.
got
Well,
the
like,
lake
for
directly
example, me
east.
being from Florida, my dad would always be like, well, just the beach is always east. I'm like, dude, I'm in the middle of fucking Walmart. Like, I have no idea where the beach is. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I think it's just something you have. I mean, growing up
Yeah.
in Denver, it was easy because the mountains are colossal and they're always west, so that makes it easier.
Terrain associate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah, I agree with that, Cons. The only thing I disagree on your point is when you're over the water. Like, you're flying over the
that's what I'm point. That's my point. Like,
there is no
when you have-
associate. 300-400
when you
miles.
have nothing no terrain, you got to just know what your azimuths are and trust them. And we even saw that at the end of the episode when they're calling down. They're like, "You sure we're going the right way? You sure?
Yeah.
There's
And
going to
maybe
be a base there."
I guess they could have not GPS, but they could have way more accurate compasses up there for sure. Like that had a bigger dial that said 1 degree, like our clocks, where you can clearly see it. But if you condense the clock down, it's going to be more difficult to say exactly what time it is. But if you extrapolate that over a bigger period, so maybe their compass was a lot larger, and you could just set, once you got on it, because they did have autopilot, you could basically go in that area, like that direction. But still, man, like.
But the one thing we are forgetting that complicates it is that they have to keep probably meticulous logs of elevation change and airspeed, so that changes out.
Yeah, especially for timing.
And you probably, like, if you're really fucked, you're like, all right, where's the sun? And then it's like,
and what time is it?
and
You
what
got to
time-
pull out one of those pieces
Yeah.
of glass like the Vikings did.
Yeah.
Have
I
you
don't
seen
know
those?
that. No.
Yeah, there's a piece of glass or some material that Ragnar Lothbrok actually figured out how to do.
Viking name.
Yeah, so I actually think I look a lot like him. So they put it out even when there was fog, and it would point down, and you could see where the sun was. So it would tell you based on the time of the day where the sun was. So if it went on the left side somehow, and that's where that's where it landed on, they would just keep going that direction. That's why they didn't know if they were in Hispaniola or if they were in Maine. They just went that basic direction because all they had was that little piece of something that showed the reflection of the sunlight.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, one thing that would make me jealous is like the Air Force guys are swagged out. Like those jackets,
They have
Oh,
a
Sharp
They
Jackets,
look
yeah.
good. Yeah.
they get the
cheap.
best stuff anyways.
Yeah.
dude. It's crazy. I got fashion isn't really necessarily something that should be on the forefront of your mind, in war. Like I feel like that is like the last thing you care about. The Germans
Look good, fight
I mean,
good though.
Hugo Boss took that to heart. They tried to have him drenched out, but the Air Force, dude. The first thing I noticed, I was like, man, I would be jealous if I was in a different division of the Army and I see those sheepskin jackets. Do they actually look that good?
Yeah, they did.
They make Austin Butlers look better.
World War
His
II's
is a little lighter.
uniforms were fucking sick across the board.
Yeah.
They were great.
Mm-hmm.
Rudy, have you ever looked up General Patton's uniforms? He created uniforms for himself that
Dual
the rest
wield.
of the Army didn't even have.
Hardo.
Dual wield. What was it like? Rhino tusk magnums. He was going to
No,
Kim-
it was
it's Pearl, right?
Yes.
Or
Pearl.
it was ivory.
Pearl or ivory.
It was
yeah.
ivory. It was
Yeah.
ivory. He had the dual
Ivory,
wield
yeah.
akimbo, and then he had the Patton. That's another dude that.
I fucking love that.
I think
that's
it's
like one of my favorite movies ever. And he talks about that. He was like, I'm gonna have like a golden football. It's like he wanted to run out looking like Notre Dame.
See, I think that's interesting between one of the most beloved Army officers and one of the most beloved Marine officers is that he went out and made his own uniform, whereas our guy was like, take off those fucking patches for your unit, take off everything that shows that you've been to combat. A Marine is a Marine.
Kind of like
He wasn't
that,
about
too.
the ribbons. I'm talking about like he had like specially tailored jackets because he
That's
just
what I
wanted
mean.
to look good.
Yeah, everybody looks the same.
What-
Everybody's uniformed.
Look good, play good.
Hermann Goring, who was head of the Luftwaffe, also that's something they talk about a lot in the documentaries. Is that he, in particular, was very, very much about how he looked, and he would dress.
He was big time into fashion.
Yeah.
Yes,
big time.
very opulent.
Yeah.
To the point where it rubbed a lot of the other SS officers in Nazi high command the wrong way, where they were like, "This dude is just."
He had like pet tigers and shit like that.
Yeah, dude.
Like, he was all.
He
about
liked to
the
have a
high
good
life.
time. He fucked around with the morphine, fucked around with the champagne,
Lots
stole
of
a
it.
lot of art. He was kind of a fabulous warmonger, which is a wild juxtaposition.
All right, so let's close up shop. We'll go around round table. 1 minute. What are you looking
No,
for?
no, time out. I have like 4 points I want to talk
We're
about. I wanna
getting
ask
long,
the group
Cons.
about.
They got to do a bunch
I
of
don't
shit
care.
in there.
No, no,
I
no,
don't
give
care.
me 3
Turn them
minutes.
off.
Give me 3
Turn them
minutes.
off.
Get him out of here.
No,
We got
stop,
something to
stop.
do.
Can I kick him
Con.
off his
I'm
own
gonna
podcast?
defend the episode. I'm gonna defend the episode.
Well, hurry up. We
Here are
got
the
stuff to
points.
do. They need
All
the
right.
studio.
Here's where they got it right in this episode, okay? When he's talking and they're giving him the mission brief and he's talking about the largest air armada in history and everybody cheered, everybody in the military still gets a little excited, sometimes a lot excited when you talk about, being the best.
Oh, yeah.
I
Give
thought
you
it
a
was
boner.
interesting when the commander is giving the brief and he synced everybody's watches so they're all operating on the same time. Thought that was good. Improvise, adapt, overcome. At one point in the mission, the M2's charging handle gets blown off. He uses a spent shell to charge the M2.
That was fire.
That was pretty good. There's got to be a better way to destroy the mission plan when you're jumping out of the plane than eating paper. That was a little weird to me.
That was
And then
funny.
the other thing that I
I
thought was
like
very
it, though,
accurate-
Cons, because you know it's a
Yeah.
stupid enlisted guy that's like, what do
Yeah.
I do with this? He's not going to do
fucking eat it.
He's like, I'm going to fucking eat it.
Yeah, that is
That is
so
a
that's
very
accurate.
that's a very specialist thing to do.
Yeah, 2 more. The snow globe lucky charm. A lot of people in the military have things that they carry with them for luck. I personally had Catholic religious medals my mother gave me
I had a
that I
pocket
always
pussy.
wore. Okay, that's
You're a
one
legend.
thing.
Oh,
then the
and my
last-
grill. My grill, Cons.
Yes.
I used to
Yeah.
wear a big grill. If I knew we were going out that was going to be somewhere super dangerous, pop that bad boy out and you could see like me shining, looking like Paul Wall. And I was screaming at somebody else to move behind a building once. Fell out, and when I was screaming, it fell out of my
Oh, you
mouth.
died.
And I was like, "Should we go back and
Dude,
get
that's
it?"
actually crazy. There is one guy in the show that's got a little something.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
just because the teeth were bad. All right, what's your last point, Cons?
The ball busting at the very end of the episode. And he's like, dude, you made it all the way to Africa and you couldn't make the runway? You couldn't go like 10 more feet and make the runway?
That's good.
I
Yeah.
thought that was good.
That was good.
And just, sorry, I think religion in general was more prevalent back then. It was more accepted to be open about it. You saw them praying before the one mission.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I think people keep a little bit more private these days. There's still public ceremonies, but overall religion is kept a lot more private now.
All right.
Although still on our dog tags.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm done.
Yep. All right, let's go through. And what are you hoping to see out of episode 4? Nikki, we'll start.
So I'm excited to see the plot develop for that one kid that jumped out of the plane and
Yeah.
has to decide between being a prisoner of war or trying to make it back. And they showed you like a little glimpse of it, of him on the train, and it looks like he's going through Nazi Germany. So I'm excited to see how that plays out.
Yep. Dave?
I'm just excited to see. Obviously, that's the next. That was the cliffhanger of the last episode, so we're all excited to see what comes of that plot line. But I want to see. I don't know. Are they going to get into the bombing of Hamburg and Dresden?
Yeah.
Bad shit that we did. The
I
shit
do
that
like not
was-
knowing where it's going to go at all.
Right. You have no idea. But unfortunately, a lot of that war we weren't like on our best behavior too. I think that it's important to highlight that stuff, and I think this is the perfect series to do that because no one ever talks about that. Like we completely fucking leveled civilian and killed 500,000 people in those 2 bombings. You know,
Well,
We're
that-
known to do it in Japan, too.
that and it's more prevalent. That storyline's more prevalent with the Japanese.
Well, that's the thing. So that's what I was going to say, too.
Yeah,
is
just carpet bombing the fuck out of.
So that's what you're looking forward to?
There was a moment, I want to say it was in Morocco or someplace like that, where there was supposed to be this meeting of Churchill and Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm.
And Roosevelt made it the policy before talking to Churchill about the denazification of Germany, which kind of gave them carte blanche to bomb whatever the fuck they wanted. And you know, and we've seen that kind of already where the English are like, we're bombing anything. We're going at night. We don't give a
Right.
fuck. Look at what they did to the Battle of London. We don't give a fuck. Where the Americans at that stage of the war,
We hadn't been touched really, other than the Japanese.
right.
You know?
And so we had like this almost like we're on like a moral high ground. Like, no, we're not doing that. We're going a day. Like we'll risk our own lives. I wonder if they switch it, and I wonder if it is like kind of almost linked to that policy directive from, because Churchill was mad about that at Roosevelt. He was mad that he said that because at that point it was like if the Germans get that message, they will fight to the last man.
Yes.
They're going to see us all as Nazis now. Like there's no like, hey, like I was a good German.
No
There's
hearts and minds.
Right. There's none of that. So Churchill was always looking for a way. He wanted a way to end the war, and he would have negotiated. Supposedly, he would have negotiated with other people in Germany. Where once Roosevelt kind of drew that line, like we have to denazify them, it opened up like kind of what they're allowed to do in war in terms of bombing cities like Dresden and
changing
Hamburg.
the rules of engagement.
Right.
Yeah.
And it made a more. So I want to see if there's, because they made a point about that morality, that line between the British and the Americans, and I want to see if that line gets blurred.
Okay.
So
Cons?
You embellished on what I was saying perfectly. Like we've learned a lot about Iraq in the last decade or so, and we've talked about this before. When it was in 2001, it was like fucking let's go. You heard Toby Keith everywhere. Everybody was pulling from the same rope, and it was obviously the same after Pearl Harbor, and but where do you draw the morality? Like looking back, obviously we were justified in going to war against the Japanese, and Germany declared war on us. Wasn't necessarily the case. However, there is still like blurred lines in there where we weren't acting as saints. We weren't, and I'd like that to be highlighted.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Like,
Cons?
how do you like if you're Austin Butler and you're trying to play this, like how do you come on? Like I just flattened a fucking city. Like what's that reaction like?
Yep.
Knowing that there's fucking 500,000 kids below me.
Yep.
yeah.
Well, if you're Austin Butler, you just don't, because you don't have that in your acting toolkit.
You don't have, you don't have that. Cons and I are agreeing a little too much.
Just put in a toothpick, man. Just keep going.
Yeah. And sorry, Austin Butler's hair is way too big. It's way too big for that time period.
He's a pilot.
He's Elvis, dude.
Yeah, but even pilots, it wouldn't be that like poofed up that high. It would be long, but not poofed up.
Why are they allowed to have mustaches?
We can have mustaches.
You can?
Yeah.
I
Just
was
can't have a
wondering-
beard.
I was wondering about that.
It just can't go beyond the corners of your mouth.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Just like Nikki, I'm looking forward to see the storyline develop with the pilot who is behind enemy lines. I think that is a fascinating arc.
He's in
that
France,
could-
correct?
I think he's in Belgium.
Belgium.
No, I
Oh,
thought he was in Belgium.
Yeah, he's in Belgium.
Okay.
But other than that, my expectation, my bar is so low. I just hope I don't fall asleep during the next episode. That's my goal. Don't fall asleep during the next.
I don't think it's been nearly as bad as you're saying. It's fine TV, but it's going down the path for me that the Pacific did, where if I never see it again, I wouldn't care. But that can still change. How many total episodes? 10?
Yeah, I
Nine.
think so.
9?
I hope there's
Nine.
like
Third of
100.
the way.
All right, Rudy, what about you?
For me, I think it's great. I enjoy that they get into the action quickly. I just like seeing missions. I'm a mission whore. One thing I will say,
I like that.
I will say that I will throw a flag on. The raid they went on in episode 3, which is the bombing of Regensburg and Schweinsfurt. The second unit, what actually did happen is they take off. They're like, there's the fog, yada yada yada. The 100th. They took off 45 minutes earlier because of a miscommunication. They don't really highlight that in the show. They're like, oh, they want us to go, we're going. That still may be qualified as a miscommunication, but they don't really show that clearly. And also they made it seem like the first group, which is the 100th with Austin Butler, that they were getting skull fucked by the other units being late. In reality, when you look at it, the other group actually got more skull fucked because the Luftwaffe, the whole point was that they were going to try to strike while they were refueling. Because they were late, the second unit actually got double the action because they were able to refuel. So that wasn't exact. It's not something that is going to ruin it for me, but something I thought was going to highlight. I do want to shout out a YouTube channel called The Operations Room that I am an absolute slut for. That's where I watch the videos about this. They have tons of videos about Iraq, about Midway, everything. They have a whole Band of Brothers playlist where they show all the operations of the Band of Brothers in the 101st. So I'm looking forward to a little bit more of the missions, and I'm looking forward to how they depict occupied Nazi Germany and sort of the spy network, which is something that is a huge part of and also resistance fighters like the French resistance was a massive part of World War II. They played a huge role in the Normandy invasion. There's so many facets of it, so I'm very curious. I haven't really been able to see. I've learned about resistance fighters, but I'm very excited to see how they depict the resistance fighters and helping the Americans get back to England.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That's just there's little blips of, you just hear about them basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like the liberation of Paris, like
And they're going to be on way higher alert, kind of like what happened in Pearl Harbor. Once you bomb us once, we're fucking paying the hell attention. And so I think you're right, that would be in a more dangerous position. For me, what I'm hoping that we get is kind of more of the human element. I'll be interested to see, and maybe not this episode or the next, I'm interested to see how they deal with seeing that much death. Because no matter what, it's going to affect you. You saw that was part of Band of Brothers too, with the one guy I forget who it
Buck.
was. Yeah, Buck. I thought it was Buck. I was like, lots of fucking Bucks in these. But Buck kind of
Compton.
lost it a little bit. He was suffering PTSD, 1,000-yard stare, all that stuff, whatever you want to call it, shell shock. But I want to see how they're all dealing with it, especially the guys that come off as more tough. I want to see how they deal with the personal aspect. And I just kind of hope that I feel the same